A remarkable scene in South Texas today where hundreds of cows being rescued from rising flood.
Farmers often face tough challenges when natural disasters like floods, droughts, or storms strike, threatening their livestock. How farmers face natural disasters in livestock farming is a testament to their resilience and determination. These events can severely damage livestock, costing billions and endangering food supplies. Despite their best efforts to protect their animals, these disasters can cause significant harm. Let's check out some of the worst natural disasters that have impacted cattle farms worldwide and how the affected farmers dealt with the aftermath. Drought devastation. In Zimbabwe's Matabeleland South Province, more than 9,000 cattle died in late 2012 and early 2013 due to poor rainfall. The majority of these deaths occurred in one district. The hardest hit area was Mangwe, where 5,476 cattle died. Matobo and Baitbridge districts also experienced significant losses, with 1,232 and 1,015 cattle deaths, respectively. The province's chief livestock specialist, Simangalifi Ngwabi, shared these figures and expressed concern that the actual number of deaths might have been even higher. Ngwabi explained that gathering accurate data on cattle deaths had been challenging because some farmers did not report them. In some cases, data collection errors had led to underreporting. For instance, in one district where it was initially reported that 172 cattle had died, it was later discovered that the number was actually 278. To address the crisis, Ngwabi suggested that the government should have provided low-cost cattle feed. She also urged farmers to change their mindset, viewing cattle ranching as a business rather than a symbol of prestige. Ngwabi recommended that farmers plant grass to feed their livestock instead of crops like maize that were unlikely to mature under the conditions. Alfred George Bango, a small-scale farmer from Matobo district, acknowledged that harvesting grass was not common in the community. However, he agreed that it was worth exploring if it could have prevented further cattle deaths. Bango also called for the government to provide boreholes, as rivers in the province dried up early, and existing dams were insufficient for all livestock. In addition to feed, vaccinations against diseases like foot and mouth and anthrax were crucial. The provincial veterinary officer, Mbuso Moyo, emphasized that farmers could have helped reduce cattle losses by ensuring their livestock was vaccinated and by preparing feed for the summer season. He also advised farmers to sell their cattle when they were healthy to get better prices, rather than waiting until they were thin and dying. The Famine Early Warning Systems Network, FuseNet, reported that crop production in Matabeleland North and parts of Matabeleland South was likely to be below average, even if rainfall improved. The Greater Mudzi Communal Livelihood Zone in northeast Zimbabwe was of particular concern, as it depended on rain-fed agriculture for crops like maize and groundnuts. Poor rain, lack of inputs, and limited draft power had severely affected production in this area. As a result, many poor households relied on food aid, market purchases, casual labor, remittances, and cash assistance to meet their food needs. 2022. Pakistan floods. Back in 2022, floods and heavy rains led to the death of more than 727,000 cattle across Pakistan, with the numbers continuing to rise. The situation was alarming, as large-scale cattle deaths due to the lumpy skin disease had already been reported earlier. Now, the floods and rains added to the devastation, leading to further loss of livestock. According to the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, between June 14th and August 28th, reports from district administrations showed that 727,144 cattle had died. The worst-hit area was Balochistan, where over 500,000 cattle had died. Other regions like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Punjab, and Sindh also suffered, with 8,771, 23,000, and 15,000 cattle deaths, respectively. The loss of cattle caused a severe shortage of meat, milk, yogurt, and other dairy products in the country. This shortage was a direct result of the deaths of so many animals. Dr. Asif Rafiq, a spokesperson for Punjab Livestock, reported that 266,700 cattle had died in Rajanpur, 1,784 in Dera Ghazi Khan, 331 in Mianwali, and 5 in Leh. Despite the grim situation, farmers showed remarkable resilience. Many had to make difficult decisions to save whatever livestock they could. Some farmers led their remaining cattle to higher ground, navigating through floodwaters to reach safer areas. Others banded together, sharing resources and helping each other build temporary shelters for their animals. Their efforts, though challenging, helped save some livestock from the devastating floods. Aid agencies also stepped in, assisting in the rescue of 7,759 animals from flood-affected areas. About 250 rescued animals stayed with families living in tents. Additionally, over 187,000 small and large cattle were vaccinated to prevent further health issues. Livestock officials raised concerns about the spread of diseases like foot and mouth disease and stomach-related illnesses among cattle in flood-affected areas. This could have worsened the situation if not controlled. The economic impact of this crisis was significant. The livestock sector is a major part of Pakistan's agriculture, contributing 61% to the agricultural value-added products and 14% to the country's GDP, according to the 2021 to 2022 economic survey. Around 8 million rural families rely on livestock for 35 to 40% of their income. However, despite these challenges, the livestock sector showed a 3% improvement that year, and provincial governments worked to promote this sector further. Progressive farmer Amir Hayat Pandara expressed concerns that the actual number of cattle deaths might be higher than reported, because many cases were not documented. He warned that the deaths of cattle and the destruction of crops would further worsen the economic conditions of families who depend on livestock for their livelihood. This would also negatively impact the country's economy. Pandara also mentioned that shortages of meat, milk, and other dairy products had already begun. He urged aid agencies to provide not only food for people, but also fodder for the remaining cattle. The Dairy and Cattle Farmers Association highlighted the importance of cattle to the country's economy. Pakistan currently has more than 8,000 cows and buffaloes, valued at over 16,000 billion rupees. In South Punjab, Pakistan, heavy rains caused destruction similar to that seen in Balochistan in 2022. Families had to leave their homes, belongings, and farm animals behind to find safety. The areas most affected included Rajanpur, Dera Ghazi Khan, Mianwali, and Muzaffargarh. According to the Provincial Disaster Management Authority, PDMA, about 555,000 acres of land were damaged, including 210,000 acres of farmland. More than 6,000 houses were completely destroyed, while another 6,000 houses suffered some damage. Tragically, 43 people died and 6 were injured. However, these numbers did not capture the full extent of the loss. Around 2,000 cattle, both small and large, died over 2 months due to flooding and lumpy skin disease, LSD. Abdul Rahman, who lived in the suburbs of Muzaffargarh, shared the struggles faced by the people of South Punjab. He stated that the losses were hard to recover from. Many of our villages are near the Indus and Chenab rivers, so flooding devastated us, he explained. He noted that livestock suffered greatly. Rahman mentioned that his cattle were already dying from LSD when the flooding occurred. I lost 11 animals. I used all my savings to buy them, and now they are all gone, he said, clearly upset. Many others, like Rahman, felt the pain of losing their belongings, cattle, and crops. They expressed frustration, saying they suffered every time there was a flood because of the government's failure to help. Farmers in the region did their best to cope with the disaster. After the floods, many worked tirelessly to clear debris and salvage what they could from their fields. They often came together as a community to help each other repair damaged homes and share resources. Farmers also sought alternative sources of income, such as temporary jobs, to support their families while they recovered. Some looked for ways to better protect their crops and livestock in the future, using lessons learned from this disaster. Unfortunately, the situation was predicted to worsen. The meteorological department forecasted more heavy rains for the coming week. Dera Ghazi Khan and Multan could experience moderate rain with thunderstorms. Additionally, mild to severe flooding was expected in the Chenab River at Hedmarala, Kanki, and Kadirabad. Medium to high-level floods were also anticipated in the Ravi and Chenab drains. Moreover, there was a warning of major floods in rivers and drains in the Mianwali district and in the hilly areas of Dera Ghazi Khan Division, Haiti's earthquake. In 2010, Haiti was struck by a powerful earthquake, the strongest in 200 years. This disaster had a terrible impact on the country's agricultural sector, especially livestock and cattle farms. Many farms and animal shelters were destroyed, leaving thousands of animals without food, water, or shelter. The loss of livestock was a big blow to farmers, as these animals were not only a source of income, but also provided food for many families. Cattle farms were particularly affected. Many cows died or were injured, and the buildings that housed them collapsed. Without cattle, farmers lost a major source of milk and meat. This loss made it difficult for families to feed themselves and sell products at the market. Farmers faced huge challenges trying to recover from this loss. Their livelihoods were deeply affected, and they struggled to cope with the situation. The earthquake left 3.5 million people impacted, and more than 1 million farm animals and pets either died, were injured, or were abandoned. Haiti, already the poorest country in the Americas before the earthquake, faced even more difficulties after the disaster. The country was ranked 145 out of 169 countries in the United Nations Human Development Index. The people of Port-au-Prince, Haiti's capital, desperately needed a plan to protect the health of their remaining animals and secure their long-term livelihoods. International organizations and nonprofits quickly stepped in to help. They provided emergency aid, including food, shelter, and veterinary care, to support the farmers in recovering and rebuilding. These efforts included distributing animal feed, giving vaccinations, and supporting livestock production to help the community get back on its feet. The earthquake showed how deeply connected the lives of people and animals are. When disasters strike, the impact on both animals and the communities that depend on them can be devastating. Many people around the world rely on animals for food, income, health, companionship, status, and safety. This connection is why, for more than 50 years, organizations have been helping governments and communities prepare for disasters. By doing so, they have enabled people to protect their animals and rebuild their lives. Over the past 50 years, these efforts have provided aid to over 4 million animals during disaster responses. This assistance has helped tens of millions of people who depend on their animals to survive and thrive. Thunderstorms on livestock in the Canadian Rockies. In July 2019, a strong thunderstorm hit the Canadian Rocky Mountains. This storm caused big problems for the local livestock industry. It brought heavy rain, strong winds, and hail. Sadly, many animals died, including thousands of cattle and sheep. Farms and ranches in the storm's path suffered a lot of damage. Fences were broken, and feed supplies were ruined. Many farmers faced tough times as they tried to recover from these losses. In Canada, the fall season brings changing weather that can be just as colorful as the leaves. Different parts of the country experience different types of storms, even though they all come from the same cause, the sun's changing position in the sky. One type of storm occurs when a low-pressure system hovers over the central Rockies. This system pulls in moisture from the Pacific Ocean and directs it into southern and central Alberta. When cold air from the Arctic combines with this moisture, it creates the perfect conditions for heavy snow. This is why the foothills of southwestern Alberta often get their heaviest snowfall during the fall and spring. In contrast, winter often brings high pressure from the Arctic, which pushes the jet stream away. This causes drier weather and cold outbreaks instead of the moist storms that bring snow. During one of these storms, hundreds of deer were struck by lightning. The damage from the storm was estimated to be in the millions of dollars. Deer carcasses were found scattered across the mountains, and there was almost no life left in the area. The impact of such storms is serious. Farmers and ranchers depend on their livestock for their livelihood. When storms kill animals and damage farms, it can take a long time to recover. Farmers may need help to rebuild their fences and restock their feed supplies. This can lead to financial struggles and worries about the future. Understanding the weather is crucial for those living in areas like the Canadian Rockies. Knowing when storms are likely to happen can help farmers prepare. They can take steps to protect their livestock and equipment. For example, they can move animals to safer areas or reinforce buildings and fences. Storm that struck the snowy mountains. In October 2022, a powerful thunderstorm moved through the snowy mountains in Australia, causing significant destruction. This storm was particularly intense and struck hundreds of sheep with lightning, resulting in the tragic loss of an entire herd. The damage from this storm was estimated to be in the millions of dollars. The storm began forming around 4 p.m. local time in the southern part of the snowy mountains and moved northward as it developed. By 5 p.m., it reached its peak intensity, bringing heavy rain and strong thunderstorms, with wind gusts reaching level 12. The severe weather led to major disruptions in the region's livestock industry. Strong winds and heavy snowfall made it challenging for farmers to access their pastures and care for their livestock. Many animals were reported stranded or injured, and some farms lost their entire stock. Local authorities and animal welfare organizations worked together to rescue and care for the affected animals, providing support to the impacted farmers. The strong winds and lightning specifically struck sheep grazing on the mountainside, causing substantial losses for local farmers. After the storm, farmers faced tough decisions. They often had to deal with dead or injured cows and sheep. Removing these animals was essential to prevent the spread of diseases, and farmers had to handle this process carefully to protect the remaining livestock on their farms. The situation was difficult for farmers, as cows and sheep were not only sources of income, but also integral to their lives and cultures. The loss of livestock had significant financial implications. Many farmers relied on their cows and sheep for their livelihoods, and without these animals, their future seemed uncertain. The storm highlighted the emotional toll on farmers, who developed bonds with their animals over the years. Losing livestock brought feelings of despair and sadness. In addition to the emotional and financial impacts, natural disasters like this storm serve as a reminder of the vulnerability of our environment. They can disrupt the delicate balance of ecosystems and affect local wildlife. The thunderstorm in October 2022 caused severe damage in the snowy mountains, impacting both the environment and local farmers. The loss of livestock, particularly sheep and cows, underscored the challenges farmers faced during natural disasters. The combined effects of the storm and its aftermath emphasize the need for support systems for farmers to recover from such events and the importance of preparedness for future challenges. 2019, Queensland floods. Back in 2019, northwest Queensland was struck by devastating floods that turned the drought-stricken area into a flood disaster zone overnight. In the aftermath of the flood, people found kangaroos dead in trees, birds drowned in drifts of silt, and our beloved bovine family perished in huddled piles that left millions heartbroken. In February, about 600,000 cattle were killed by catastrophic flooding across North Queensland's Carpentaria Gulf Plains. The floodwaters rose suddenly, forming a wall of water up to 70 kilometers wide. Record depths were reached along 500 kilometers of the Flinders River, submerging 25,000 square kilometers of country. Thousands of cattle were stranded and many drowned. Despite losing 70% of his herd, Cattleman Harry Batt was more concerned with the animals. He went on, "All the kangaroos and bloody little marsupial mice and birds, they couldn't handle it." Harry was correct to be anxious. According to a study published in Austral Ecology, floods rushing over Australia's plains have disturbed native species for millions of years. As climate change causes more violent floods, this region will see the effects exacerbated. One of the families living in a family cattle station 60 kilometers north of Cloncurry had just received more than 700 millimeters of rain over 7 days, with the majority of that falling over 4 days. This extreme weather event, equivalent to an inland cyclone, decimated much of their native wildlife, along with the domestic livestock. They were constantly exposed to wind and cold driving rain for far too long. The majority of the country was either covered in floodwater or churned into a bog, making their feed inaccessible. The cattle became weak, using what energy they had to struggle through the mud, and were pushed by the driving rain. After enduring these terrible temperatures for days on end, their vitality was gone, and they eventually perished from exhaustion while attempting to remain warm. Graziers around the district tried frantically to save what they could and to compassionately euthanize those animals who, unfortunately, were beyond saving. Helicopters were used to deliver the fodder that they had available to the survivors, and this was their only mode of transportation. The majority of the region was inaccessible to automobiles and remained so for some time. Rachel Anderson of Eddington Station at Julia Creek in western Queensland says she lost about 2,000 cattle, or roughly half of the property's herd. Farmers understand that recovering from such stock losses will put them under significant financial duress. "I can provide for my family right now," Anderson said. "But in 6 months' time, or when the bank comes for their repayment, I don't know what I'm going to do. None of us know what we are going to do. We can't get loans because we've got nothing to borrow against. None of us have got anything left. I'm not going to lie, it will finish some people up, but others will be rebuilding." She also pointed out that a rotting stench had set in, but the local farmers had no idea what to do about it. The loss of hundreds of thousands of cattle after several years of drought was a debilitating blow, not just to individual farmers, many of whom lost literally everything, but to rural communities too. British Columbia's 2021 disaster. In the fall of 2021, British Columbia had big problems with flooding and landslides. These disasters made more than 15,000 people leave their homes. When December came, cleanup started, but many farmers had to leave their animals behind. They estimated that 12,000 hogs, 420 dairy cows, and over 600,000 chickens were left, along with millions of honeybees. Disasters like this used to happen only sometimes. In the 1980s, the United States had about $3 billion disasters every year. But by 2022, this number jumped to 18 disasters in just 1 year. While governments are trying to prepare for disasters, they often forget about farm animals. News reports often talk about barns filled with animals that flood or catch fire, which leads to many deaths. But these stories rarely talk about what could change next time. In the US, Canada, and the UK, there are no laws that say farmers must move their animals before disasters. Experts say that moving animals is often too expensive. A new bill in Congress might change this, but we are not sure yet. Many large farms are crowded. In British Columbia, some barns can hold an average of 50,000 chickens each. As of 2021, there were no rules about how many animals could be kept on farms in Canada. Managing so many animals during a disaster is very hard, and there are no laws to protect their welfare or plans to help them. For farmers, deciding to move animals comes down to money. They think about costs like how heavy the animals are, how far they need to travel, the time of year, fuel prices, and insurance for the animals during transport. Moving many animals quickly can cost a lot, especially since farmers already have tight budgets. If a disaster happens, the need for transportation goes up, making costs even higher. Farmers weigh the cost of moving animals against leaving them behind. They also think about insurance. When animals are left behind, the losses are often covered by government help or private insurance. The US government gives a lot of money to farmers for livestock lost in disasters and disease outbreaks. This support might make farmers less likely to spend money moving their animals. There's not much financial benefit in rescuing animals. The money given for losses usually does not relate to prevention, making it cheaper for farmers to leave animals behind. The US Department of Agriculture has a program that helps farmers for animals lost in bad weather. This program pays about 75% of the average market value of the animals. In 2022, nearly $47 million were paid to help with losses of about 350,000 farm animals. Moving animals before a disaster is possible. For example, during Hurricane Florence in North Carolina in 2018, many animals were moved successfully. More than 20,000 pigs were relocated thanks to farmers' efforts. However, there are no laws that require farmers to rescue or move animals. Some places, like zoos and research labs, must have emergency plans, but farms do not have the same rules. We hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more.